Hi, I wanted to ask two questions. One, are you familiar with W.H. Auden's poem, Archaeology?
No, I don't know if I know that poem, but I know his Stop All the Clocks, of course.
Oh, no, yeah, that is very different. Yeah. I have a lot of gripe with, never mind. So the poem, it was the last, in every edition of Auden that I've seen, it's the last poem. And it ends.
I'll look when I get to my
No, it ends with the line. So he talks about history, and he says, "Oh, archaeologists, you don't really know." And he says that history is basically a lie being made essentially by the criminal in us. Goodness is timeless. So
history is a lie being made by the criminal.
No. So history, like the history books, everything the history books say is a lie because history is made by the criminal in us. Goodness is timeless. So the idea of the poem is that what we have left from history, all the history books especially, he was in the 50s before micro history is much, all the events, these are one side of humanity. And everything in the background, everything that makes possible is the goodness that is timeless and you never hear about. It's actually a nice poem. He also has the great line, the poets have learned us their myths, but just how did they take them? That's a stumper.
The poets have learned us their
myths.
Their myths,
but how exactly did they take them? That's a stumper. So he said that we don't really know. So it's just a really nice poem. Also a nice usage of the to learn as in to teach, which is very old.
My next book is going to be on social meaning. I'm working on this book right now. It's going to take a few years. But I'm going to go and reread these things.
No, I will. I can send Shmuley the stuff. I can send it to you. The other question that it's more of a one. The text that I'm working on, my PhD, is called I call it the Era Epic. It has like 10 different names in the literature.
You're not the Assyriologist.
I am.
Oh, you're the Assyriologist.
I am, yeah.
Oh, great, yes.
Yeah. I hope it's great. I'm looking for a job right now. But
I'll tell you a funny story about the Oriental Institute of Chicago.
Speaking of this, now it is no longer the Oriental Institute. It is the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World, of the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures, West Asia and North Africa. ISEC.
They no longer called the Oriental Institute?
No, not at all, because since 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, so up until 2 years ago, I had not been notified.
No, it's now ISEC, but that's a different thing.
Can I tell you my story very quickly?
Yes, of course.
So when I was at the University of Chicago, which I loved, my neighbor was Peter Dorman, a very famous Egyptologist, who then went on to be the president of the American University in Beirut before Khoury, the current president of the American University of Beirut. And Peter Dorman was at a very famous party. This would have been in 1996 or 97. The Egyptology department had assembled at the house of someone at the University on the campus in Hyde Park, and there were these buildings that were 3 flats. There was one apartment per floor, and out back there were these wooden decks that were stacked one on top of the other, and all of these raucous Egyptologists had gone out onto this wooden deck on the second or I think the third floor in this particular case, and we're all hanging out there drinking and doing whatever Egyptologists do.
They actually they get stuff. They're surprisingly, they know how to live, unlike Assyriologists.
Okay, so the Egyptologists know how to live. And there were so many of them out there on the deck that the structurally unstable deck collapsed.
Oh no!
And like the entire Egyptology department of the University of Chicago fell 3 stories and was injured. And apparently the entire world of Egyptologists was ecstatic because all these tenured jobs had just opened up. Because there's one Egyptology job per year in the whole world. And now all of a sudden they were like, oh my God, I hope none of them died, as it turned out. They were all alive.
I think there's a very...
You may want to pray for a storm.
No, I think there's a novel to be written, it won't sell well, about someone who goes around murdered tenured professors to get their jobs, like a contractor, grad students, and exactly at my stage, call, can you please murder...
I have a small corner of a tablet. I don't know where I acquired it, a clay tablet written in cuneiform.
Which one? Do you have a photo? Have you had it identified?
I can send you a photo. I have it. And I took it to a professor of, I think, your field at the formerly known Oriental Institute, ISEC, to translate for me.
Which one? Do you remember which professor it was?
A very old guy when I was a young man. So I was.
Ooh, that does not narrow it down.
I know, exactly. Anyway, he translated it for me. And he could read it, which I thought was just like magic. By the way, this is one of the things. People misunderstand me a lot. Of course, I'm very devoted to the sciences. But I am such a fierce defender of the humanities, and people don't get this about me, because what is the mission of the university? It's the preservation, production, and dissemination of knowledge. And where in our society do we preserve Assyriology? In these institutions. The money is to be devoted. The money is to be devoted to the preservation of these ancient languages, among other things. That is our purpose, right? And so I think if my world, we would have many more people doing what you're doing.
But then more people would compete with me for the job.
Maybe they would. I don't know how it would play out, the equilibrium. But we don't have enough people doing that sort. And one of my colleagues here is Howard Bloch. I don't know if you guys know him. He's a medieval French. He's extraordinary. One of the most erudite people I've ever met. And actually, the most erudite person I've ever met is Tony Kronman by far. But Howard is up there. We would have more people like that, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing I've heard someone outside the field say about Assyriology in a while. So thank you. No, 1 second. I haven't answered my question, though.
Okay, sorry.
So very quickly, never mind. That later. I'll talk to you later.
What's your question?
No, I'm just saying, the text I'm studying, it's called the Era epic. I think you might be interested in it because it has a scene where Era, who's the god of death, destruction, and hatred, who's also a complete narcissist, goes into Babylon, and then he becomes a demagogue. He changes into a man and becomes a demagogue, and then then he assembles a mob, and then he makes the mob kind of go on a revolution against the king, basically. And then he goes to the king and makes him go and kill all the rebels. And the nice thing about it is that Era makes other people behave as he behaves. So he's full of hate, and he's completely self-destructive and not self-destructive. He can't be destroyed, but he makes people he makes people filled with self-destructive hatred, because he does it to manipulate them into their own destruction and to destroy the things that they hold most dear to themselves.
Okay, so 2 things. This text was reduced to writing when? 5,000 years ago?
Oh, no, not that much. Probably about 1,000 BC, though it's hard to tell.
So 3,000 years ago it was reduced, and how old is it before then? What is it from?
We don't know. The earliest attested copies are about the 7th, 8th, or 7th century BC. I have a chapter in my dissertation
I would love
about...
if I could have it on the rocks.
I knew you'd love it. Talk about instant likes, baby.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, I have a chapter in my dissertation about
Would
how...
you please send this to me? Because in my book on meaning, I'm looking for these ancient stories.
I actually have a new translation of it just running.
Please send it to me.
Okay.
It'll make me seem more erudite when I quote it in my book. Yes.
Oh, thank you. So this is a small question back to 2015, but I promise it contains the most natural dovetail to whatever you want to talk
It's
about.
okay. People are
research.
curious, and now you're giving me whiskey, so you can have anything you want.
So when I think about other academics who got caught up in campus controversy, right, particularly like culture war-esque controversies, they all universally left academia and sort of leaned more into culture war stuff.
Yes.
Jordan Peterson now works for the Daily Wire, right?
Yes.
You did not. You were a notable exception to that trend.
Yes.
So there must be something about the university that you found valuable
No,
or some
I'll tell you.
reason. So I guess that's my question. Why did you decide to stay?
the same thing, and I rely on Nietzsche. When you look into the abyss looks into you. So I think a lot of these people have lost their way. The way I think about it is that I was once mugged when I was a teenager, and so I was a victim of this crime. And why would I let this criminal define who I am? Right? Why would I, for the rest of my life, see myself as a victim? Or why would I let this chance event? I'm not going to be defined by what a bunch of young Yale students did on a particular day. It's not their business to define me. I'm different than that. I have my own destiny in life. I have my own path in life. I happen to stumble into this mess, but that's not who I am. And I don't need to adopt this. Now, I could choose to if I wanted. People are free to do what they want. But that's my whole point. In fact, one of the reasons, and I am happy to talk to you guys about this, but it's I rarely indulge this because I didn't choose this. These people acted in this insane way. I did my best, and it's not me. I have other things I want to do in my life. And a lot of these people have become the way you describe because I think they haven't been able to resolve it. It's such an awful experience. I haven't even told you guys so many things that were so awful about that period in our lives. They're angry, understandably angry at the people who did this to them, and they want revenge, right? But Mandela said, seeking revenge is like is like drinking a poison and hoping it kills your enemies. Yeah, I mean, this is not a wise way to be, in my view. So I've thought about this. I'm aware of what you said. I refuse to be defined by these crazy people, and I have no desire to become my worst self, or worse, to become like them. You know. So anyway, so that's why.
So I guess there are other things you could do besides stay at Yale. So is there anything about like the university being that?
Stay at Yale. Hold on, let me say something about that.
Yeah.
You may not know much about academia, but what do you think it would take for another university to hire me? Not now, 10 years later, but in 2016, do you think any university? No. In 2014, I could have gone to any university in this world. In 2016, where are my choices?
Trump University. Who's got the mic? Who's got the mic? Speak with the mic in your hand.
So you call yourself an optimist, but are you optimistic about the future of Yale and higher education more broadly? And one of the, I guess, an aspect of this question is, are you optimistic about the presidential search process and having someone new besides Salve?
I think the pendulum will swing. I'm not that optimistic about Yale, honestly. I think MIT and Stanford are going to take us to lunch in the next generation. I think they are training. You know, what people don't seem to understand is that the wealth is going to be created no longer by patrician bankers from New York that come to Yale and study English and return to their parents' investment bank and then give money. The wealth is going to be created by techies, and they're going to give the billions that will then support the Assyriologists. You should want more computer scientists trained at your university, because those are the ones that are going to endow, they're going to create the wealth.
Do you think the techies are going to care about Assyriology?
They may not, but then they will free up resources. Some will, but they may also free up the resources to support these universities. So I think that
Yale's doomed.
I think Yale is going to continue to fall in the rankings, unfortunately, unless it's extremely capably led suddenly, because we still are the second richest university in the world. We have tremendous wealth. We could do anything we wanted if we allocated the resources correctly. We have a great brand still. We have a lot of human capital talent. But I think the rise of MIT and Stanford is going to give everyone a run for their money, all the historical elite universities. I think Harvard will be okay. I think Berkeley is going to be screwed by the state schools. I think the private schools, for the next 15 years, I think the private schools are going to be much safer bets. So I think in general, this cultural moment we're in with some of the threats to academic freedom, some of the threats to free expression on campus, some of the things we're talking about, I think we're not yet, we may be past peak, maybe, there's some debate, but we're not yet on the other side of it. So I think we have another half generation of it, maybe 10 more years of it. But it will turn. It will eventually stop. The pendulum will swing and we'll get a new equilibrium, a new stability. Where the university rankings are at that time, I don't know. What happens to Yale, I also don't know. It depends on who they appoint. It depends on the will of the board and the sagacity of the board. I don't know what's going to happen at Yale. But, you know, I'm 61, and I'm going to run my lab for the next 10 years or 12 years, and then I will, you know, retire to write books or something. More books than I write now.
Would you send your kids here now?
Well, I did send my kids here.
Would you still do it?
Let me put it this way. I think if you're the kind of student who takes charge of their own education, and you have maturity and insight and some strength of character, I think you can learn anything you want at Yale. Yeah, I love the fact, I love our elite universities. I think they're a hallmark of our civilization. They reflect our wealth. They reflect our values. They are drivers of our security and our health and our well-being and our innovation. They're deeply important institutions in our society, in my view. And that's why I get so angry when they're mismanaged and they're handled poorly. I think people are abandoning their posts, honestly, and not just the administration, but many faculty. I think many faculty don't see academia as a calling. They see it as a sinecure. I'll just get a wage and do some BS and stuff. They don't really take it seriously. And so, I think, so I don't know what's going to happen to Yale. I don't know who the next president will be. I suspect it's going to be someone internal because I think it'll be very difficult for them to appoint an external person that will arrive here in 2 months, to take over July 1st. So, what?
Odds on Holloway getting it from Rutgers?
I don't think Jonathan will be selected. He might be. I don't think Jonathan will be selected.
It's going to be a black or a woman.
I think it's been scrambled by the Claudine Gay fiasco. I think that axis.
That was awesome.
So I think that'll be scrambled. So I don't know. I've heard some information which I'm on camera, so I'm not going to talk about. No. I'm not going to talk about it anyway.
It's Heather Kirk and the word is out.
No. I'm not going to talk about it anyway. But I will say that I suspect, given the fact pattern that I'm aware of, that it's likely to be an internal candidate, just because that person can assume. And then you guys can work down the roster of who are the logical internal candidates. But it could be someone. It could be a wild card. It could be someone, as you suggested, like Betsy Bradley, who was at Yale and could easily come back. But think about what it would be for that person to abandon their current institution with no warning.
I just wondered if they were fast-tracking him in advance through provost.
Yeah, but if they were doing that, why hasn't he been appointed already?
Because Peter Sullivan was still finishing his term.
Oh, I see. No, there's not that kind of planning that's going on.
I don't know how far.
No, there's not.
But he
All
was
right. No, it's not. Anyway, and that particular man has a lot of baggage at Rutgers. So I don't know what'll happen.
Where's the mic? Yep.
He was an invidious force in 2015. Yeah.
Against the Calhoun matrix.
He was an invidious force in multiple regards.
Victor, go.
Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Christakis. I have
Call
two
me
questions.
Nicholas, please.
For context, for the first one, I was at Harvard from 2015 to 2019. So that
Which
fiasco.
college were you at?
I was in Dunster.
Okay, also in Dunster.
Yeah, great house.
Who was the master when you were there?
For Roger Porter.
Oh,
my
I know the
first
Porters.
year,
Yeah.
and then I forget. It was philosopher my last 2 years there.
Okay.
I forget the couple.
Wasn't that impressionable? Keep going, yeah.
But I went to the Foundational for Individual Rights in Education conference 2017-2018. Talked to Greg Lukianoff a few times, and something that he said that struck me. He said on the issue of like free speech, free expression. In the past, it was almost like a tool that you could say the oppressed, the minorities kind of used to be able to express their ideas, right?
Yes.
Especially
Because the
like-
majority doesn't need protection of free expression. They have the ballot and the gun, right? So this is Martin Luther King's famous argument, and he's correct, that these are protection of minority rights. This is why we protect them, in fact.
Right, but
Yeah.
around this era, though, he said, right, like 2010s, there was like a shift, feeling that almost like free speech was used as like a tool against like those with less power.
Yes.
I guess.
The people began to make that argument. I don't believe it's true, that argument, but people certainly began to make that argument.
Well, I guess,
Right.
why do you think that argument is made, and how do you foresee, based off of your research and understanding, that our understanding of that is going to shift potentially?
So I don't research these topics, and I'm often asked to give remarks on kids these days and campus issues, and I say no to all of those requests. I'm happy to come and talk about science and stuff. In a salon environment like this, I'm happy to talk to you guys. So I don't actually research these matters, and I'm not John Haidt, who's brilliant, and I really like John. He's an interesting man, actually. So I don't have any scientific expertise on these matters. I think that, however, just anecdotally or empirically, I think actually the people who are saying that free expression is a weapon of the powerful actually are the powerful ones themselves, certainly on our campuses. And I think this inversion is very self-serving. Like I said, I don't think the majority doesn't need protection of its speech rights. If you have a popular view, you can express it. It's the minority with the unpopular view, which is what it means to have an unpopular view. It means it's uncommon. Popular means free, you're the one that needs protection. And so, and MLK was magnificent on this. I mean, he was just extraordinary. And by the way, I didn't say this earlier, but I don't want to overdo it because some people have misread my book, Blueprint. I don't think that, Blueprint does not provide, nor does it intend to provide, some kind of a prescription for political order. I'm not suggesting that I know, or the research that I do or have discussed in that book is a guide for how we should organize a good society. But what I do say, and I do believe, is that any political arrangement that seeks to arrest these innate human tendencies is doomed to failure. So for example, if you think about the Stasi or communist or totalitarian regimes, they try, so the institution of the family or marriage is a threat to totalitarian regimes, right? Because you want everyone to love dear leader or to love the state. You don't want them to have intimate connections. Or if you look at the kibbutzes, that I talk about this in Blueprint, they were like, okay, we're committed to equality between men and women. We want everyone to work together, so we're going to take the kids out of their parents' household. They're going to be raised in a communal environment. It works at most for one generation and then is abandoned because the people love their children. It's a very natural tendency to love your children. And so the Communist Party in China or in Russia that tries to stop, and Marx writes about this, and Engels, actually, he and Marx had a big conflict about this, tries to stop a commitment to the family is doomed, in my judgment, to failure because our love of our family is just so innate and necessary for our survival. And the Stasi tried to decrease friendship, right? They tried to make everyone afraid of everyone else, right? Your friend could be informing on you. 50% of East Germans were informants, so now I don't know whether I can trust I can't talk to my own friends in the way that Shmuley was describing, that wonderful way. Those political arrangements that seek to stop these innate things, and I'll come to free speech now, won't work in my judgment because they are swimming against the tide. So when you think about our First Amendment rights in this country, which include assembly and free expression, those are actually, in my judgment, founded on, freedom of assembly is founded on, you get to choose who you want to be your friends, right? The state can't tell you, no, you can't hang out with these people. That's not going to work. A sound state arrangement will not work if it prevents you from hanging out who you want. And remember I mentioned teaching earlier. Teaching is free speech. In order for me to be able to teach you something, there has to be a free flow of ideas in a society. A society that tries to stop the flow of information is not a functional society and will not endure, is my argument. Because the flow of information is actually essential to our survival. So while Blueprint is not intended as, nor should it be seen as, a prescriptive system for how to organize a good society, I do believe that those types of political arrangements that try to stop these fundamental aspects are doomed to failure. I'll give you one more example. The love that, in a heterosexual situation, the love that men feel for women and women feel for men was a threat to many communitarian movements in actually throughout history, but especially in the 19th century in the United States. So, and then in the 20th century. So the communitarian movements went one of two directions then. Either they became, they were seen, so that they became completely celibate, like the Shakers, and say you're going to be loyal to the Shakers, therefore you cannot have an intimate relationship with a partner. So no sex. Or polyamory. So you're not going to have a particular partner. You can have sex with anyone you want, right? So the irony is that both of those, the no-sex solution and the polyamory solutions, are both trying to solve the same problem, which is that people love their partners, and they're going to put their partners ahead of the community, right? So these norms arise repeatedly across history and always fail, right? There is no sustained society which has been able to organize itself in these fashions that stops the sentimental attachment that people have for their partners. Anyway, this is all discussed in Blueprint. Did I answer your question or no?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did.
Excellently.
Yeah.
And my second question
Yeah.
is,
Oh, good.
you
And then I'm going to tell you my Bill Sapphire story. Someone remind me to tell my Bill Sapphire story. Go on.
you talk about the evolutionary right kind of origins and explanations for like love and friendship, and Shmuley talks a lot about like our social fabric. I feel like, and like how it's frayed. Something that I've been thinking about is like how I guess technology. I think in Sapiens, the point is made maybe agriculture. How did it kind of like affect us before we gained control of it? You could argue technology is having that same effect. What advice would you give us in terms of how we navigate our lives?
Well, it's so hard for me because I struggle with this a lot because I'm definitely a technophile. I'm not a Luddite. I think that anyone that's trying to argue against technological advances is not only not going to succeed, but also I think is probably wrong. So I'm afraid of AI, but I am getting a grip on my fear and coming to believe that it's likely like any other technological advance in the past, and ultimately will be a net benefit. I do believe that this technology can be harmful for sure, and certainly people earlier mentioned online pornography, but also just the whole Instagram, the whole Facebook, the whole TikTok kind of way of being is, I think, deeply harmful. I think Jonathan Haidt is right about this. So I am worried about it. I'm not like a sunny, Panglossian kind of, it's going to be fine, never you worry, the best of all possible worlds. But I don't think it's practical to argue against it. And I had one other thing to say about the technology, and what was it? I forgot. Oh, Bill Sapphire, floating third point. Actually, this is a good example of that. So I didn't agree with his politics at all, but he wrote a very funny column in the back of the New York Times Magazine when I was at your age, called On Language at the end, which I read religiously every week. It was a very funny kind of examination of etymology and so forth. And as he got older, he found it very difficult people would ask three-part questions. They would say, Mr. Sapphire, I have three questions, 1, 2, and 3. And he couldn't remember the 3. And so he would answer the first question, answer the second. By the time he got to the third question, he could no longer remember it. And this happened repeatedly. So he finally developed a heuristic, which was Bill Sapphire's floating third point, which was an answer you could make to any third question, which is there are no easy answers. And you could watch him do it. He would say, and the first point, yes, and the second point is my answer, and the third point, there are no easy answers. And then he did this routinely. And I find myself doing the same thing now.
Until somebody asked what his wife's name was. Okay.
Yes, exactly. As a third question, what's your wife's name? Yes, there are no easy answers.
Can you talk about your research in mobs, and particularly the aftermath of a mob in a given community?
I haven't done research myself in mobs, but I've done research on many collective action phenomena.
Okay.
One of my favorite, this is a subtle example, it's not exactly about a mob, but it's about, so if you think about when you have an aversive experience, and actually this may apply to Judaism now that I think about it. When you have an aversive experience, you learn from that aversive experience, right? You put your hand in the fire, it burns, you learn something. But how do collectivities learn something? Why does the Jewish faith reduce both the winning and wanting argument to the text? Why do we preserve both arguments? Why are we the people of the book? Why do we privilege human capital? Because we've been victims of pogroms and we've fled repeatedly, and we need portable wealth, and knowledge is portable wealth. So communities can come culturally for sure, or like, why do the Afghanis have the kind of crazy culture that they do? Well, if you've been invaded for thousands of years, eventually you adopt a set of strategies which make you very unappealing to invade, and actually successful, if you think about it. So we look at them and say, how do violent people with all these crazy ideas? Yeah, but from Alexander the Great to the Brits to the Russians to the Americans, nobody can succeed in Afghanistan. So they must be doing something right. So one of the things we've studied is how the network structure of a group may encode valuable information. So as background to this, let me cultivate in your mind the following metaphor. As you all studied in high school chemistry, you can take carbon atoms and assemble them one way, and you get graphite, which is soft and dark. Or you take the same carbon atoms and assemble them another way, and you get diamond, which is hard and clear. And there are two key intellectual ideas there. First of all, these properties of softness and darkness and hardness and clearness aren't properties of the carbon atoms, they're properties of the collection of carbon atoms. And second, which properties you get depends on how you connect the carbon atoms to each other. Take the same carbon atoms, connect them one way, you get one set of properties. Connect them another way, you get a completely different set of properties. And it's the same with human groups. I can take you guys, as I taught in class today, and I can connect you one way, and you're really sweet to each other. Or I take you same people and arrange you in a different topological fashion, who's connected to, and you're mean sons of bitches to each other. Therefore, these properties of kindness and meanness are not just properties of individuals or even aggregations of individuals. They are emergent properties from the pattern of connections of individuals, from the topological architecture of how the ties are done. Now, with that background, imagine you're a group of people who've repeatedly had to flee, for example, in the communities that are formed after natural disaster. Like one of the examples we use as a model is coastal villages in Japan that have repeated tsunamis. So the tsunami comes, the people flee inland, some people die, some survive. They learn from the experience. And another tsunami comes 100 years later or 50 years later. After a while, the social arrangements, the topology, the architecture of the connections of the people may encode valuable information about how this group can endure when stricken by a tsunami. So it's not just the knowledge in our brains that has been reshaped by this stressful experience. The pattern of our connections, we've arranged ourselves like diamond instead of carbon because we're repeatedly hit by tsunamis. You guys never get tsunamis, so you are like carbon instead of diamond. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So the structure of the networks can encode information. I think this is what you asked me, isn't it? Or no? You asked me, what did you... you asked me communities that face challenges? What was your question?
Mob.
A mob. Yeah, mob. So I think that after there may be a relic. Oh, and I remember something I was going to say earlier, which I'll come back to. There may be. I remember now what I was going to say. A relic of mobs. There may be an echo in the social fabric after the formation of a mob that can be worrisome. Going back to what you guys said earlier, one thing I wanted to mention. About the technology. You asked me. Who asked me about the technology? The technology issue, I think, is only going to be an issue that my answer only holds for, let's say, 100 years. But over longer time periods, actually things could be very different. And my favorite example of this, which is also discussed in Blueprint, is the gene culture coevolution example of the domestication of milk-producing animals. Does anyone know this example? Oh, good. This is a fun example to teach. So think about this. How many of you can drink milk tolerably? Pretty much all of you. Now that's very weird, actually, because up until 10,000 years ago, no adult could. Why? Because you only drank milk when you were an infant, and then you were weaned, and then you never drank milk again for the rest of your life after you were weaned. So you had an enzyme in your intestines called lactase that digests the primary sugar of milk, which is lactose. And that enzyme was expressed while you were a baby and then stopped being expressed thereafter because it would be wasteful. Your body, any humans that needlessly were producing lactase for their whole lives would be disadvantaged compared to the humans that stopped the production of lactase after they were babies. So in fact, all humans until about 10,000 years ago had sort of lactase non-persistence. The lactase stopped being produced in their bodies around the time babies were typically weaned. Is everyone with me still? And then what happens? Multiple times between 3,000 and 9,000 years ago in multiple parts of sub-Saharan Africa primarily, also around the Levant, humans domesticate milk-producing animals, camels, sheep, goats, cows, and so on. Suddenly, because of this historical, cultural product, namely this technology, the domestication of animals, we change our environment and there's now milk in our environment. Previously, there was no milk in our environment. Now there is milk in our environment. Those among us, therefore, who had a mutation that allowed the lactase to persist into adulthood gained an advantage over those who did not produce lactase into adulthood, because we could now have another source of food, we could drink the milk, and a source of hydration during times of water being spoiled. The deep lesson from this story is that something that humans did changed the course of our evolution. We, humans, with our technology and our history and our culture, changed the environment, and then over a period of a few thousand years, changed the trajectory of our evolution such that most people on the planet today can digest lactose, which was not possible before. Well, I think there are actually, once you begin to think about this, there are many examples of this, actually. So for example, I think we may be becoming more myopic since the invention of glasses. Someone like me would have not reproduced, maybe you too, 10,000 years ago, we would have been eaten by lions. Now we can survive, okay? So certainly modern medicine is doing that. Modern medicine is curing people who otherwise would have died, who would have had, let's say, genetic defects, who would have been weaned out. I think climate change is like this. I think the human beings, we are changing the climate of the planet. I think in 5,000 years, the kinds of humans that are alive then will have a different genetic profile than the kinds of humans that would have been alive had we not changed the environment with climate change, okay? And there are many examples of this. For example, there's a very famous example of the groups that migrated to the Tibetan highlands from China. They evolved the capacity to produce a certain kind of hemoglobin that was really good for these low oxygen tension environments up in the Himalayas. So this cultural behavior, which was we're going to settle the high mountains, we're going to invent clothing that allows us to live in this cold place. But now there's not a lot of oxygen there, but slowly but surely those among us who have mutations that allow us to cope more effectively with the low oxygen environment survive and changes the course of evolution. So people now believe that historical innovations and technological innovations may actually operate over historical time periods, which is mind-boggling. And usually in animals, it takes 30 generations to change the animal, not to a new species, but to change its expression. So 30 generations in humans is about 1,000 years. So I think that there's actually a lot more of this than we realize. Some people speculate that people that grow up in languages that privilege sounds, like Chinese, Chinese has been spoken for at least 5,000 years and is a tonal language. Some people believe that people who grow up in that environment hear sounds differently than, let's say, I do. And have been selected because the people that could express themselves using this language over the thousands of years, that this has been the cultural product. So this is very speculative, but some people believe this. So yes, so I think technology, so the social media technology that we make, or the argument about the why Ashkenazi are so smart. You know the argument? No, I mean, this is a prohibited topic, but I'm sure it's true. Why are the Ashkenazi so smart? One thing says, well, the Catholic priests didn't reproduce, whereas the rabbis had lots of children. The rabbis said, so the smartest, most learned people had more children. So there's a lot of speculation about the Ashkenazi advantage, which, by the way, we were talking earlier about the bell-shaped distribution, also gives you more Tay-Sachs disease. So you get more people at the top. Yes, there's lots of complications, and it's very speculative and so forth. But I think it's probably true, actually. So if you create a society which privileges the written word, and books have become, I think the human language capacities in a cultural environment such as all humans have created with the printed word, well, we invent written languages 5 or some odd thousand years ago, but they become widely available beyond the priestly class just in the last few hundred years. I think the people that are alive in 1,000 years will be very different than they would have been had we not invented printed language. Oral language is very normal. We all, hundreds of thousands of years, we've been speaking. But writing is not a natural skill, and reading is not natural at all. So I think if you think about the challenges that kids that are dyslexic face, and you just think about being in a world where the printed word is so important, it's got to be a disadvantage to be handicapped in terms of reading printed words. So anyway, I think there are many cultural innovations that are going to shape our evolutionary
Nicholas, I I've been on the edge of my seat the whole time and been dying to ask a pair of questions. So
Yes.
if the audience allows it, I'll ask too.
Please. They're not 3, so I think I can cope.
Firstly, I'm really fascinated as to how you explain things at a fundamental level. So one thing that Shmuley mentioned when we kind of did the around the horn about our friends is that we also have to be cognizant of, people that have malintent.
Yes.
And I guess from a biological standpoint, the question I have is how do we see this perpetuation of like evil or malicious acts extending millennia?
Well, I don't have an explanation for evil. Satan. I mean, I don't know, what the origins of evil are, but I can tell you that we just have a paper that's under review right now at PNAS, at the Proceedings of the National Academy, on the origins of interpersonal antagonism. So earlier we talked about the evolutionary origins of friendship. So all of you every one of you has had the feeling of being in the company of your friends. And you know that kind of warm feeling you get? Your heart rate goes down, you just feel good in the company of your friends, right? That whole physiologic response that you have to being in the company of your friends, that evolved. You evolved to have that good reward, to feel good when you're in the company of your friends, because you're more likely to survive when you're with your posse, when you're with your friends. And so anything that made you want to stay with your friends, we would have evolved this capacity, and we did. Okay, fine. But why do we also feel antagonism towards our enemies? It's one thing to provide an explanation for our capacity for friendship, but I ignored earlier our capacity for antagonism. Well, I think actually that paradoxically there may be some benefits to antagonism. And I'm not talking about having enemies. I agree completely with Shmuley. It's important to know who your enemies are. But we don't just track our friends, we track our enemies. And we remember who our enemies are. And why do we devote the brain power to doing that? Well, part of it is self-preservation. But then why do we even have the capacity for enemies? And part of it has to do, in my judgment, in my opinion, with these repulsive forces within an otherwise attractive system restructure the system in a way that may improve its overall performance. In other words, if you imagine this group of people only having friendly connections, we would arrange ourselves one way. But if we just had 2 or 3 unfriendly connections, like everyone was friendly here except you didn't like her and he didn't like him and he didn't like her, those 3 antagonistic ties, the arrangement we would put ourselves in might be a little bit different. That structure would be a little bit different, and that difference could be helpful to the group as a whole, actually. So one way is that these just to give a specific example, having some antagonism reduces echo chambers of information. If anyone was always ever deeply friendly with only the people that were immediately around them, then there would be less movement of novel information through the system. But you guys are all friends with each other, by and large, except you don't like him. And they're all friends with each other, and he doesn't like you. So these 2 groups are moved apart a little bit. So they have the opportunity to discover information that via the friendly connections spread to you, but you're not all the same group that only has redundant information. They are exploring a different region of the information space, acquiring information because they've slightly repulsed from you, so they're in a different part, and then now the useful information can come to you, ironically, because of the mild levels of antagonism in the system.
I just want to add something to this, because I think I think the question is great, and I love your answer.
Yeah.
There's something naturally comfortable about being among friends, you said, right? And, from an evolutionary perspective or just a social perspective, we survive well among friends, so it's easy to be among friends. As opposed to, the antagonist or the enemy. It's interesting that in the Bible, there's actually a commandment, one of the 613 commandments, which we say every
One of
day.
which commandments?
So there are 613 commandments in the Old Testament. 248 positive and 365 negative. Now, about half of them are not applicable today because we don't have the temple. And a lot of the commandments were dealt with just the sacrifices and the ritual that was performed during temple times and in certain agricultural laws. But we follow a few hundred commandments in the Torah. If you're following the Torah as a traditional Jew, those are the anybody told you about 10, that's kind of the shortcut. Anyway, but one of the commandments in the Torah.
I'm all about heuristics, Shmuley.
Yeah.
300 commandments sounds a bit rough for me. I'll stick with 10.
Well, think about how many laws you follow every day in America. Like those law.
Yeah, but I don't know the laws.
Right. Most Jews don't know all the laws.
Oh, they don't. They don't follow them innately.
Well, you're supposed to study them and learn them, which is another discussion. But
Anyway, go on.
yeah, it's interesting when you talk about friends and enemies is that there's one of the commandments in the Torah which we actually recite every day after we pray in the morning is to remember Amalek, who is the epitomization of the enemy. Zachar, the nation of Amalek that swarmed and attacked the Jewish people when they came out of Egypt on their way to freedom and becoming a nation. Amalek had a particular nature, it was very antagonistic, and it attacked the Jewish people. And every day after we pray in the morning, we say that God commands us to remember the nation of Amalek, what it represents.
Wasn't this controversial like a month or two ago after October 7th? It came up somehow, right?
Oh yeah, because
I didn't know what the reference was. Now I know the reference.
Yeah, Bibi Netanyahu said that Hamas is the modern descendant, maybe even literally, but and excuse me, instantiation of Amalek, and therefore they have to be removed from the universe the way Amalek.
Oh right, you have to be wiped out or something.
But the eradication of Amalek starts with remembering Amalek. What's interesting to note, just listening to you respond to this question, is that we don't have a similar commandment to remember any particular nation friend. And I think you ask yourself, there were so many nations that were good to the Jews, right? Why don't we say every day after our prayer to
remember our friends?
To remember our friends. And at a simple level, you could argue that there's a lot of friends and there's maybe this one particular enemy, right? And so, but that would be one possible answer. The eradication of Amalek is also, what is it going to say? To remember your friend and preserve them or enhance them. But I think it's maybe something that we're talking about tonight in your dialogue, which is it's a lot easier to forget. We don't want to remember the enemies. We almost don't want to believe that they exist. That's the natural state.
I'm
right?
very interested now in the history and the archaeology of this group. Who were these people?
The Amalekites.
The reason why.
Where were they and who were they?
So they
Jordan, no evidence, but not because necessarily not there. The archaeology of this part of the Levant is extremely complicated, very hard to see ethnic definition. So we have the biblical evidence, but we don't because everyone in the area wrote on perishable materials. We wouldn't know that they were there.
Yes, let me double down on that. There's no evidence that there were Jews either in that period. There's no archaeological evidence of there being Jews in Egypt.
Well, yet the Assyrians wrote about Atreides.
Yeah, no.
Atreus. They wrote.
That's the Hittites.
Oh, the Hittites. I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, the Hittites.
So I'm not.
Not Atreides. I'm sorry, Atreus. Yeah, not. Actually, you call them. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you the archaeological answer for which there's no evidence because there's no evidence of a lot of things in archaeology. But if you want to know what the Torah is teaching us,
Yes.
what the Bible is telling us, and about this nation Amalek is that when the Jews came out of Egypt, there was a nation that first of all attacked us as in the desert.
Between the Red Sea and Israel.
In Egypt and the land and Sinai,
Okay.
and coming into the Promised Land, right? For which there's also no archaeological evidence that the Jews were ever in the desert. So there's or maybe there is some.
I thought there was some in Sinai.
But I'm not going to give you an archaeological answer. I'm going to give you the answer of what the lesson in the Torah is and who this nation is and what it represents. And then he can spend the rest of his 5 PhDs figuring out where the evidence. I'm sorry. I didn't say anything about nonsense. I said if you want to spend your life dedicated, you're an archaeologist, I'm a rabbi, so I'm going to give you the answer.
Okay.
What is Amalek? Who is Amalek? Amalek was the nation that the Jewish people came out of the land of Israel. Yeah, out of the land of Egypt. And were on their way to freedom, mocked the nation. And what we're taught is what they did was the Jews were experiencing liberation. It was a euphoric moment in our formation as a people. We had seen God do miraculous things for us. And Amalek comes along and he says, it's just a coincidence. It's serendipity. It's an accident. There's no God. The things you're assuming are miracles are delusions. And so the core of Amalek is
Skepticism.
Skepticism. It's the cast doubt in your mind. It's that when you see something and you embrace it and you love it and you appreciate it, he comes along and he throws that little ounce of cynicism into it to really break down your worldview and does it in a very deceptive and sardonic, really, insidious way. And so that is what Amalek represents, and that's the core of all evil. It's the person who comes along and almost pops the illusion, right? That you have a perception that you've lived with maybe for centuries, or for you it's very empirical, it's very real. And Amalek comes along and says, maybe it's not so real. It's a very dangerous psychological state.
It's also very Jewish, actually.
Yeah, it is, in an ironic way.
Yeah.
Sometimes our enemies are close to those.
Yeah.
They're kind of, maybe it's your best friend or your next door neighbor. So yeah, I agree. Amalek was right there. It was the first confrontation. It's like, it's the client, the lawyer relationship. I always, when lawyers sue me, if they're good, I always tell them, what do you do when you're not suing me? I actually have to sue somebody else. When you come work with me. So that's how you find out who the lawyers are. But they're really good on the other side. You pick them up. But that is what Amalek represents. And so Amalek, in the physical sense, Amalek waged war with the Jews. Amalek, in the psychological state, is doubt. And you have to, the Torah tells us to remember this enemy, because we all have, what's our biggest problem with anything? When we aspire to success, it's the inhibition. It's the fear to do it. It's like, I can't do this. I can't, right? You doubt yourself. When you doubt yourself and you doubt your reality, you're blocked and you're locked out. You have to believe first in yourself. And that's what God is telling us. Zachar es asher asol Amalek. Remember what Amalek did for you. You were a nation of slaves. And you came into a desert. And then you go on your way to the promised land. And Amalek wanted to come along and really, he wanted to take it down, to demolish that conviction you had as a believer. And not only you have to remember Amalek, but it has to be eradicated. So you have to remember first. You have to know, identify that skepticism, whether it's internal or external. And then you have to eradicate it. And we don't want to, we kind of cast that blame of the inner skeptic on others. We always put it on circumstances. We always have someone else to cast it on, when in essence it's coming from ourselves. And so what we do is we say, no, there's a legitimate reason for me to doubt that I can do this. When in reality there's no legitimate reason. It's just you saying I can't do it. And so what the idea, the philosophy here that God is saying is, Zachar Sasha, remember Amalek. Don't deny that it's out there. This universal enemy, this particular Amalek enemy, this Amalek, which is within each and every one of us, which is this cast of doubt that it's inside of us. And so we try to put it into a box and we move it away and blame the reason why we're not going to do what we have to do on something else, when in reality it is that Amalek within each of us. You have to remember it, you have to know it, you have to identify it, you have to eradicate. And I think people, we don't want to, because it's very uncomfortable. It's a lot easier to go to the therapist, to take the pill. I mean, let's talk reality. The pill, the alcohol, the psychedelics, the doctor, the therapist, is a lot easier than actually dealing with the essence and the core of the problem. So the enemy within has to be identified first. And if you and we want shortcuts, we want faster, simpler ways to solve these existential crises, these existential problems. And that's why every morning you have to get up, every morning you have to say, remember the Amalek, whether it's the Amalek of history, whether it's the Amalek today in Gaza, whether it's the Amalek inside every one of us. Know that it's there, remember it, face it, confront it, don't deny it, and don't blame it on something else. And don't try to make pretend it's not there. It's there, it's very real. Why is there evil in the world? I don't know why there's evil in the world. Because God created the world. This goes back to the beginning of everything you talked about tonight. Why God created the world of good and evil is this adversity, of course. If there was a world of good, there would be no purpose of existence. It's to determine, the human being was born into the world to determine the distinction. That's what, you talk about evolution. I mean, we are human beings. We're created, I'm just going to throw in a little bit of another perspective on the universe. We're created in the image of God, which is what the Bible tells us. Teaches us that how are we different? That we deal with good and evil. An animal doesn't deal with good and evil. There's no sense of good and evil. It's survival. It's food, sex, and go forward. Anything to survive. The human being gets up and says, "Wait a second, is that a good thing? Is it good for me? Is it good for the world? Is it good for humanity? Is it good for society? Is it good for civilization? Is it good for the climate? Is it good for the planet? Is it good for the universe?" And so when we look at the world that way, that's what makes us human beings. How could we ever want to live in a world that's talk about binary? It's how could we ever want to live in a world that was one or the other? That we would have no reason to get up in the morning. Stronger after adversity. I mean, your whole life is about making these distinctions. Working in a hospice, your mother dying at 25, your father leaving the house, 2 adopted siblings. I mean, think about those things, how they made you who you are, and how much you've given to the world because of those things that inspired you. Most of them were very dark moments. I mean, if I go through your last 2 hours, they were actually the terrible things that happened in your life that made you who you are today. Those terrible things that wouldn't have happened to you and to all of us. Who would we be today? So when it's easy to forget and to put them aside. Zachar Sasha Hamad, we know who our friends are. We love our friends. You'll have more, you'll have less. Some of them will stick around. Some of them won't stick around. It's also very important every day to remember that unfortunately there's the other side, and denying it or burying it is only going to make it come back in ways much worse because it doesn't go away. And why God created the world with that is for us to do. That's sometimes you have to.
Well, I think the the eradication of our enemies and the search for the enemy within. These are all very important ideas. One idea I would add to that, which is related but not the same idea, is why, for example, in martial arts, you bow to your opponent.
Before the fight or
Both. You bow to your opponent. You're grateful for your opponent because it's through combat with your opponent that you become better. And it's the same with J.S. Mill's, he who knows only his side of the argument knows little of it. We should welcome critique and disagreement. That's how we get better.
Of course.
Our argument gets better, and when we subject it to the criticism of people who actually oppose it.
Let's bring that back to Yale.
Well, I mean, inshallah, I mean, yeah.
the dialect.
Yes.
Without, I mean,
I could actually stay up a long time still.
but you have issues.
Well, I have a bunch of things to do, but I can't even believe it's 11 o'clock, and just as you predicted, I wouldn't want to end the evening, but yeah.
We have to. I don't apologize for it. I want you to know that
Yeah.
we soft close once or twice a week, every single week in this room at 9:30, and I can tell you that on almost every night at 9:30, this place soft closes. If it's 11 o'clock and that one person's got things to do,
Yeah, well,
it's evidence of how great this was.
well, thank you so much.